Hey guys, Hector here. I saw this video. I want to talk about it. I saw it a few months ago actually. A friend posted it on Facebook, and then I was on YouTube today. I'm going to be looking over here because all the information is over here. I went on YouTube today, and it said in my what to watch next or whatever section, it had the Fine Brothers Entertainment channel. It was a Parents React to Don't Say in School, and I was like, is this the same video? So I checked it out. It was the same video. I wanted to talk about it a few months ago, but I just didn't get around to it, or I forgot about it and all that kind of stuff. So since I just saw it again, I thought I'd kind of talk about it a little bit. And so basically, it's a music video. I'll leave a link in the description so you guys can see it, and it has all the lyrics in the description box, in the music video's description box, not in my description box. And this guy says a lot of weird things about school, basically. Some of them are pretty, insightful, I guess you can say. Insightful. I agree with some of it. Some I totally do not agree with. It sounds like he kind of has a European type accent, sort of. So I can't say that things in the United States are the same in the schools compared to things over in Europe or whatever. I can just talk about my experience in the whole United States school system, and mostly or specifically California, because I was born and raised in California. I only went to schools in California, but I know a little bit about schools in the other states. And so first, before I talk about this, I just want to say the schools in the United States, there's a lot of arguments among what they should teach, from the taxpayers, who of course fund the schools, and from the government, who kind of set the curriculum, sort of. It's kind of a combination, government, taxpayers, and all that kind of stuff. And so, of course, since each state has sort of its own laws that are, kind of overlooked by the whole federal government, a lot of states do have different requirements and different classes and courses. And actually, a lot of states in the South don't want to teach about sexual education at all. Like, they say their only sexual education is don't have sex until you get married. The end. They call it abstinence only education or whatever. And also, some of those same southern states that are very, very, very religious want to teach creationism in school alongside history. Of course, creationism is God created man and earth and all that kind of stuff. So they want to teach that shit in schools. Of course, it's not like that in California. They do not have abstinence only stuff. They do not have creationism in school. Nothing like that in California, but in other states they try and put some of that in, and some of them, I think they do have that in certain states. And so I want to talk about these other issues. Oh yeah, and also one more thing. The amount of money that actually goes into schools depends on the state. In California, I found out when I took my political science class earlier this year, I found out that California's budget has 60% of the entire budget per year is set towards education. Now, I don't know how they distribute that, since California is so big, and it seems like some schools are really, really poor and some schools are pretty rich or whatever, but still 60% of all the budget, all the tax money from California's taxpayers goes to the education system. So that's pretty cool, but other states, I can't say that's the same. Okay, now I kind of want to talk about these lyrics and stuff. And so first he starts off with, I wasn't taught how to get a job, but I can remember dissecting a frog. Of course, dissecting a frog, I think that'll stick in most people's minds. I wasn't taught how to pay tax, but I know loads about Shakespeare's classics. My math class taught me about taxes in the whole sense of percentages and stuff like that back in like 7th grade. But they don't teach us the whole income tax system, because that stuff is really, really complicated, and there's a lot of different loopholes and stuff you can get, and that's why they have people that's specialized specifically in income taxes, and you can go to them to do all your taxes and do all that fancy stuff. Because if they taught that in schools, that would probably take an entire year just by itself. Probably, maybe, I don't know. And actually, the Fine Brothers Entertainment, the Parents React to thing, they specifically said, or at least one of them said, if you want to teach all the stuff that this guy is saying, kids would be going to school for like 12 hours a day, because he wants to do a lot of stuff. And of course, some of it is mandatory. Some of it, like English, science, math, I think history, that stuff is mandatory. But a lot of these other things that he would like us to learn is kind of extracurricular optional. And then he says, never spent a lesson on current events. I don't know how it is over in their schools or whatever, but in our schools we definitely do cover current events. And he said, instead I studied the old American West. Of course, history, at first, when I was little, I thought history wasn't important. I was like, what's the point of learning about history? We're not really going to use it unless we're like a historian or work in a museum or something like that. Which, as I grew up, is a pretty ignorant frame of mind. You should definitely learn about history to pretty much learn about your mistakes or learn about other people's mistakes and to not repeat them. Especially if you want to be politically active and vote for laws and all that kind of stuff. You want to know about the history so you don't repeat those mistakes. And then he says, I was never taught what laws there are. That just blows my mind because my school teaches us so many laws, but of course there are like even way more laws that it's impossible to teach us every single law, but they teach us a ton of laws in school. So I don't know what school this guy was going to. And let me repeat, I was not taught the laws for the country I live in. Yeah, that's your country's problem, I guess. I don't know. But I know how Henry VIII killed his women. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. Yeah, I didn't learn that. I didn't learn about Henry VIII. And I was shown the wavelengths of different hues of light. Yeah, I was shown that too, but I don't remember it. That's another thing I want to talk about. They teach us a lot of stuff, and we don't remember a lot of it. Because some of it just isn't important to us, so we just forget about it, or because we don't keep practicing it, so we forget about it. And, it's not always our fault. I think they teach us certain things that will prepare us for other things if we choose to go to these other different routes in life. Because if they just taught us a small thing of how to be an adult or whatever, like this guy is kind of saying, then other people will be like, well, I kind of want to be like a scientist or whatever, and I'm totally unprepared to go to college because I didn't learn anything in high school. Because he even says, didn't learn how much it costs to raise a kid or what an affidavit is, but I spent days on what the quadratic equation is. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. I actually kind of forgot about that equation. I knew some of it, but I kind of forgot about some of it. And so I do have to look at some of these equations up, like how to find the perimeter of a triangle or whatnot. But my point is, if they didn't teach us any of that, then we would have to go all the way back to the basics if we wanted to follow that career path later in life. That's pretty much all I'm saying about that. But how to raise a kid, they have classes on that, sort of. Because honestly, if they taught us like in middle school, high school, how to raise a kid or whatever, I'm sure a bunch of parents would be like, why are you teaching us or our kids how to raise children? You shouldn't be teaching them to be adults yet or whatever. And so I think a lot of it does have to do with parents and what they want their children to be taught. And parents should teach their own children certain things that the schools don't. And that's also part of the whole sexual education thing. Some people think schools shouldn't even get involved in sexual education. Only parents should teach them that. But some parents aren't even knowledgeable in that area altogether. So sometimes I think it is kind of the schools, well, I don't want to say responsibility, but it'll benefit everybody. And then he says, I know igneous or I'm not sure how to pronounce that word. Metamorphic and sedimentary rocks. I don't know how to pronounce that word because I don't believe I was taught about that. I do think I was taught about sedimentary rocks, but metamorphic and the other one, maybe I was, but again, it just wasn't important that I really remembered. And he says, yet I don't know squat about trading stocks. They should not be teaching you about trading stocks because that stuff, stocks trading is just stupid, and I definitely do not think that's a mandatory thing that they should teach you in schools. That's a completely optional thing, and it's definitely a thing that only really rich people can even do anyways, or people who have extra money. And that pretty much everybody who knows about stocks or knows even a little bit about stocks is don't invest in that stuff unless you're ultra rich, because you'll just lose money basically. And he says, or how money works at all, where does it come from, who controls it, how does the thing that motivates the world function? That's called economics class. You can take that in some high schools. You can definitely take that in college. Again, completely optional. But of course, they do say a little bit about money in like a social studies type class, which you take in middle school, high school, even elementary school, man. I don't know what kind of school you're going to, but come on. And then this part I definitely agree with, but I'm from the older generation. He says, I was too busy rehearsing cursive, because he said not taught how to budget and disperse my earnings. I was too busy rehearsing cursive or whatever. The cursive part, definitely these days, cursive is not necessary. Back in the old days, I don't know. Well, even when I was going to school, it wasn't necessary. They just taught us that as almost like a side thing in elementary school. And then once I got to middle school, they say, do not use cursive. We don't want you using cursive. So really the only purpose of learning how to use cursive was to read old-ass documents that you still wouldn't even be able to understand with the language that they use, and how to sign your name. But these days, I don't think they should be teaching people how to use cursive at all. That can be an extracurricular activity if they want, but it should not be mandatory. I think mandatory class should be typing class. I took a typing class in middle school. That was completely optional. I think it should kind of be mandatory these days, since everybody's online and everything's kind of electronical now. And how to recognize the most deadly mental disorders or diseases with preventable causes. How to buy a house with a mortgage if I could afford it, because abstract math was deemed more important. Or abstract maths. They don't say maths in the United States, so I definitely know that this guy is from a different country. But how to recognize the most deadly mental diseases? You want them to teach us that in school. Or diseases with preventable causes. Well, that's the whole sexual education thing. They teach us about that. But other diseases, well, they have health class for like diabetes and stuff. But there's just so many diseases out there, so many mental disorders. This guy wants us to teach so much stuff that I personally don't think is important, or there's just too much of it. And then he says, they say it's not the kids, the parents are the problem. Then if you taught the kids to parent, that's the problem solved then. Again, if you have a class that says this is how you're supposed to raise your children, people will go apeshit, at least here in the United States. That's the whole point. Well, a lot of people in the United States is all about freedom and all that BS. And so a lot of parents are like, I'm going to teach my kid how to parent, how to be an adult my way. Schools cannot do that. So I don't know how it is if people in his country think the same way, but in the United States, it is definitely not, it would not fly here. And another kind of important thing, he says, I'm only fluent in this language, for serious. The rest of the world speaks too. Do you think I'm an idiot? That is kind of incorrect. I know a lot of countries that do teach two languages throughout their lives, basically. English is usually one of them, and then their native language. And like, I have a bunch of friends from Japan that they say I think they said it's mandatory, I'm not sure, but they start teaching them English from a very young age. And even so, they're adults, and I'm talking to them, and they still have they're still really bad at English, is what I'm trying to say. And so really the rest of the world doesn't really speak two language, and is definitely not fluent in two languages. And here in the United States, a lot of people, when I was in high school, they had they had a lot of extracurricular activities, but they said you had to take certain extracurricular activities in order to graduate. And I believe a foreign language was one of them, and I took Spanish. Lots of people take Spanish. Some people take German, some people take Japanese or Chinese or whatnot. And so the United States does have the optional second language. I think it's part optional, part mandatory. I don't know. But the point I'm trying to make is they teach us a little bit of it, and you do not remember it unless you keep on practicing it. That's just how it is with any language. And people from other countries, they are not that well. They're definitely not fluent in two languages, and they won't keep up with those two languages if they don't keep practicing it. So that's just a ridiculous statement. And they chose the solar over the political system. So like a typical citizen now, I don't know what I'm voting on. They taught us a ton about the political system in the whole social studies classes. And again, you can take political classes in college class, or in college, and it'll teach you a lot more in-depth stuff. And they just kind of barely taught us about the solar system in middle school, and I don't even think high school, only in middle school. And then back then they were saying the whole 9 planets, and now it's 8 planets and all that kind of stuff. So this guy, I don't know which policies exist or how to make them change. There are a shit ton of policies, and yeah, they kind of teach us how they taught us like in elementary school, you know, well, at least on TV. I think even in school they showed us those TV shows like How Does a Bill Become a Bill, Schoolhouse Rocks, and all that kind of stuff, you know. I don't know, I just get irritated at what this guy says, because they teach a lot of that stuff in our schools, and some of it I think is completely unnecessary. Some of it you can take optional, some of it you should take in college. And I'm sure he says that, or I'm sure he titled it "Don't Stay in School" just to get a lot of views or whatever, or to kind of push his message forward. But really, if he does believe that people shouldn't stay in school, then he is ignorant. Let's just say he's just really, really ignorant. But I think he's just pushing it forward so he can get his message out there. Which again, some of it I agree with, some of it I definitely do not agree with. So, well, that's pretty much it. That's all I wanted to say. My experience here in the United States, especially in California, and then how the whole system works and all that stuff. But, well, when you guys are parents, you guys can see how you handle it. Do you think a class would have helped you really? And would you allow the schools to teach your children how to become parents and what they should learn? Some of it, they definitely shouldn't learn this, because like in my high school, they said you had to at least pass algebra to pass high school. And then if you took algebra the first year, you had to pass geometry. And so some of these things I think are unnecessary, but at the same time, like I said earlier, if you only teach the basics of how to be an adult, then you kind of unprepare kids for going down certain career paths later in life. You're just kind of focusing them on the same old 9 to 5 schedule, which isn't really 9 to 5, it's like 7 to 5 or something. And on the whole, parents should teach children things, and then school should teach children things. From my experience, at least later in life, definitely not earlier in life, it's just so expensive these days to have a family and to do everything, and even to buy supplies for school, to raise children, that both parents are usually working now all day, so they don't have time to come home and then help kids and teach the kids more stuff and do anything and pay bills and all that stuff. There's just no time. So parents are always working, kids are always in school, they don't always have the time to kind of connect and do all that stuff, and then kids have so much extra homework. Do you think kids can do all that homework that they have and then still learn even more from their parents on other activities? Sure, the parents teach them certain things that they might need to know about, but just some of these things he's asking for, it's a little ridiculous, I guess. So I'm sure this video has gone on for way too long, so I'm just going to end it there. Tell me what you guys think. Leave a comment giving me your opinions on this. Have you even seen this video before? Again, link in the description. Tell me your comments on the video. Tell me your comments about my comments or my response or whatever. And we can have a little discussion. It's all cool. And so that's it. Subscribe if you want to see more videos of me talking about my own opinions or American related kind of issues, because again, I was brought up in the United States, so my opinions are kind of based in the whole American sphere or whatever. So yeah, that's it. See you guys later.